He is completely blind in both eyes. But here is a terrifying truth that shocked medieval Europe. This man didn't just survive, he won. Over a brutal, decade-long career fighting multiple imperial crusades, he never lost a single battle. He outmaneuvered emperors, outsmarted the brilliant tactical minds of his days, and broke the rules of warfare forever. This is the insane story of Jan Žižka, the one-eyed mercenary who lost everything. The Holy Roman Empire's most elite, heavily armored knights are charging at full speed. They are trained from birth for one purpose, to crush rebellions. And today, their target is a pathetic makeshift army of untrained peasants, farmers, and monks. The peasants are led by a man who cannot see them, who lost everything, went completely blind, and proceeded to invent the medieval tank to save his nation from annihilation. To understand how a blind man defeated the most powerful armies in Europe, we have to look at who Jan Žižka was before the darkness took over. Born into minor, impoverished nobility in Bohemia, Zizka spent the first 50 years of his life as a gritty, battle-hardened mercenary. He fought in the bloody forests of Poland, clashed with the legendary Teutonic knights at the Battle of Grunwald, and worked as a royal bodyguard by his late 40s. He had already lost his right eye to a childhood fight or an early skirmish. He was a cynical, middle-aged soldier of fortune who knew exactly how professional armies moved, how they fought, how they thought, and most importantly, how they failed. But while Zizka was aging, Bohemia was reaching a boiling point. A charismatic priest named Jan Hus began speaking out against the corruption of the Catholic Church. He argued against the sale of indulgences, where the rich could literally buy forgiveness for sins, and demanded religious equality. The Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund promised as safe passage to a council to debate his ideas. It was a trap. In 1415, Jan Hus was burned at the stake as heretic. When the news reached Bohemia, the population didn't back down. They exploded in fury. They called themselves Hussites, renounced the emperor, and prepared for war. But they had a massive problem. Emperor Sigismund called for a total crusade against them. The Pope gave his blessing. Bohemia was suddenly surrounded by a massive coalition of professional knights, professional mercenaries, and imperial armies. The Hussites needed a commander. They turned to the one-eyed veteran, Jan Žižka. When Zizka looked at the new army, he realized he was facing a logistical nightmare. Standard medieval warfare dictated that whoever whoever had the most heavily armored cavalry won. The Hussites had almost no horses, no armor, and no swords. Their army consisted of ordinary farmers, women, and teenagers. If they met the imperial knights in an open field, they would be massacred in minutes. So, Zizka decided to completely re-engineer the concepts of warfare. If his men didn't have weapons, they would build them out of what they knew best: farming equipment. Farmers spent their entire lives swinging heavy wooden flails to harvest with. Zizka added iron spikes, studs, and chains to those flails. Suddenly, a peasant farmer had a weapon with massive centrifugal force that could smash through a knight's steel helmet or break a horse's leg from a safe distance. But his absolute masterpiece was Wagenburg, or the wagon pole. Zizka took heavy four-wheeled agricultural transport wagons and heavily reinforced them with thick oak planks and iron plates. He realized that if he couldn't build a stone castle to protect his peasants, he would build a mobile wooden fortress that could travel with them on the battlefield. This car would arrange these reinforced wagons wheel to wheel chaining them together in a massive defensive enclosure. A massive wooden trench shield was dropped between the wheels to protect the gaps underneath. Inside each wagon, he stationed a hyper-disciplined team of about 15 to 20 people. Each person had a highly specific role. While the rest of Europe viewed early firearms as clumsy, inaccurate toys, Zizka mass-produced them. He armed his peasants with early hand cannons called pistola, which is the direct origin of our modern word piston or pistol. He also deployed heavier wheeled artillery pieces called Haufnice, which is where we get the word howitzer. This car didn't just invent a mobile force. He created the world's very first tactical combined arms squad layout. In March 1420, Zizka's new tactical system faced its first true baptism of fire. He was marching with a tiny force of just 400 Hussite peasants, including women and children, when they were suddenly cornered by an imperial force of over 2,000 elite ironclad cavalry. The odds were greater than 5 to 1. The imperial knights smiled. They thought this would be a swift, glorious slaughter. But Zizka chose the ground perfectly. He positioned his forces on a narrow strip of dry land nestled directly between two large muddy fish ponds that had recently been drained. He ordered his men to quickly form the wagon fort. Because of the ponds, the knights could not flank them. They had to charge straight down a narrow bottleneck. As the heavy cavalry thundered forward, their massive, heavily armored warhouses. As the heavy cavalry thundered forward, their massive, heavily armored war horses sank deep into the thick treacherous mud of the drained ponds. they became sitting ducks. From the safety of their wooden walls, the Hussite peasants opened fire across bolts and iron-hand cannon. Bolts tore through the advancing lines. The knights who managed to crawl out of the mud and reach the wagons were met with an absolute wall of iron-spiked flails and pikes beating them down from above. The charging knights completely panicked. As night fell, a thick unnatural fog rolled over the marshes. Blinded and broken, the imperial forces retreated in absolute humiliation. The peasant army had shattered the maze of the invincible medieval knight. The Hussite revolution was real, and Jan Žižka was now the most feared man in Bohemia. For the next year, Zizka tore through Bohemia, dismantling imperial forces at every turn. His discipline was absolute. His men didn't drink, they didn't pillage without orders, and they moved with mechanical precision. But in 1421, tragedy struck during the siege of Rabi Castle. Zizka was standing near the front lines, directing his forces, when an imperial crossbow bolt slammed directly into a nearby tree trunk. The impact caused the dry wood to shatter instantly, sending a jagged, razor-sharp wooden splinter flying directly into Zizka's only good eye. The wound was catastrophic. Surgeons managed to save his life, but his remaining vision was gone forever. At the age of 61, Jan Zizka was now completely 100% blind in the medieval world. A commander losing his sight was considered a definitive death sentence for his army. The Holy Roman Empire rejoiced, believing the Hussite rebellion would disintegrate into chaotic factions overnight. Emperor Sigismund immediately organized a massive new crusade, gathering over 50,000 troops to crush the rebellion once and for all. But they severely underestimated the brain inside the blind skull. Zizka refused to step down. He realized that while his eyes were gone, his spatial memory, his tactical calculations, and his understanding of terrain were completely flawless. He stayed at the absolute front lines, riding in a fast chariot directly next to his standard bearers. In December 1421, the imperial forces trapped Zizka and his army inside the city walls of Kutna Hora. To make matters worse, Roman Catholic sympathizers inside the city opened the gates at night, letting the enemy in Zizka's army was completely surrounded. Outnumbered 4-1, cut off from supplies, and freezing in the dead of winter. It was a perfect tactical checkmate. On other general would have surrendered, but the blind general had one final, insane trick up his sleeve on the freezing night of December 20th. Zizka ordered his men to hitch up the horses. He lined his armored wagons up in a single, straight column like a column of modern tanks. He was about to perform the world's very first armored breakout offensive. As dawn broke, the blind general gave the order to charge straight into the enemy ring. Instead of waiting to be attacked, the Hussite wagons charged forward at full speed. They unleashed a continuous moving artillery barrage from their cannons, blasting open a massive hole directly through the Imperial lines. The knights were so stunned by the sheer audacity of a moving fort charging at them that their lines buckled. Zizka's column sliced completely through the encirclement and escaped into the safety of the valleys. But he wasn't done. Once he was safely outside the trap, Zizka reorganized his men, gathered local reinforcements, and launched a massive, unexpected counterattack against the Imperial camp. The Crusaders, believing they had already won, were completely caught off guard. They broke and ran in absolute terror, leaving behind thousands of casualties and their entire supply train. The blind general had turned a fatal checkmate into an absolute historic rout. Jan Žižka did not die on a battlefield. He was never defeated. In 1424, while marching on a new campaign, he succumbed to the Black Plague. But even days, but in even days, his fierce, terrifying defiance never faded. According to historical rumors, on his deathbed, or on his deathbed, his soldiers asked him where he wished to be buried. Zizka looked toward them and gave his final legendary order. Flay my skin from my body and use it to make a military drum, so that when you march into battle and the enemy hears the thunder of that drum, they will know that Jan Žižka is still leading his people. Whether the story of the skin drum is historical fact or psychological warfare means it worked. For decades after his death, imperial armies would routinely flee the battlefield. The moment they heard the Hussite battle hymns echoing from over the hills, Jan Žižka proved to the world that genius isn't about the resources you have or the sight in your eyes. It is about changing the rules of the game when the odds are stacked against you. If you want to see more hidden tactical masterclasses from history that the textbooks leave out, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment on what topic we should cover next, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe the button.